As we reviewed in our first TA Live webinar, throughout the year, we're going to be discussing each of the 10 essential principles from the Optimizing Outcomes Guidelines from the National Association of State Directors of Special Education, or NASD, followed by a panel of experts who are going to share their experiences based on each of those principles. If you have questions throughout the presentation portion, please put them in the Q&A box down at the bottom of your screen so that the panelists can address them during the panel discussion. We will also be using a live minder throughout this year to keep all the resources we discuss in one place. The resources discussed along with the webinars and the slide decks can all be found in that live minder. As a reminder, this webinar is being recorded. However, we're going to stop the recording during the panel discussion after they present their slides, if we have time. Type your questions in the chat if you have any technical questions. All right, it is time to get started. Welcome to the RMTC-DHH May 2021 TA Live, Principle 9, Qualified Providers are Critical to a Child's Success. My name is Sherry Conrad. Thank you to Catherine Montoya, our ASL interpreter from AI Media, for interpreting today. We will continue to use the live minder found on this slide throughout the year to keep all the resources we discuss in one place on optimizing outcomes for students who are deaf and hard of hearing. The resources discussed during the webinars, as well as the slide deck, can be found in the live binder. We've discussed the first 8 principles of the Optimizing Outcomes Guidelines. Links to the recordings can be found in the RMTC website and in the Optimizing Outcomes live binder. This month, we're discussing that 9th principle. Qualified providers are critical to a child's success. With only 2 to 3 out of 1,000 children born with a detectable level of hearing loss in one or both ears, in many districts, this leads to situations where professionals charged with their instruction and care may never or very infrequently have had a child who is deaf or hard of hearing in their classroom. They may not have the background knowledge, the experience, or skill set to meet the very unique and highly specialized needs of these students. Further, the needs of students with hearing-related disabilities are often very different from those needs observed by their hearing peers. As a result, providers of services to students who are deaf and hard of hearing require specialized expertise to address the unique language, communication, and social implications of their hearing status. Some refer to this perspective as the DHH lens. Teachers of the deaf and other professionals specializing in the education of students who are deaf and hard of hearing have knowledge and expertise that is not found in every teacher. In order to adequately ensure that students have access to instruction, professionals have to look at the students who are DHH through the deaf lens. Students who are DHH have needs that are unique compared to other ESE populations. The hearing level in and of itself isn't the issue, but it's the lack of accessibility to language that creates those barriers. The lack of accessibility to language could be either a visual language like American Sign Language or spoken English. When language is not 100% accessible, then it creates a barrier to learning and can even lead to neurological changes in the brain. Since the needs of the students who are DHH are unique and highly specialized across all aspects of learning, we need professionals that are looking at instruction of students who are deaf and hard of hearing through that deaf lens. Professionals specializing, meaning professionals who have received specific training in the work they do, in the education of children who are DHH need to be part of the multidisciplinary team to assist with appropriate interpretation of assessment results using their highly specialized expertise on how hearing loss can impact communication, social behavior, independent functioning, and academic performance. So where do we start? On the slide, you're going to see a graphic representation of students who are deaf and hard of hearing in the district. It starts with not only knowing where children are coming from, but where they're going. Being familiar with the supports available in the district, as well as needs the student will have, will allow the IEP team and service providers to better prepare the students for transition from one perspective to another. For example, it's important for service providers in small and/or rural districts to know what supports are lacking in a community in order to teach the student workarounds. There are areas where audiologists only visit once or twice a month. Teaching students to access the needed supports as an adult is an important part of the transition planning and instruction. But if the student has never been taught what an audiologist is, then teaching them to access those skills in a pre-transition time might not prove to be successful. I'll give you a second to review the slide on the screen, which is a flow chart of district capacity for deaf, hard of hearing. Ideally, every person responsible for the care and education of a child who is deaf and hard of hearing would be able to speak to the unique needs of the population. One way to look at the overall capacity within your district is to determine just how many roles fit that bill described in the Optimizing Outcomes Handbook. The graphic on the screen is a flowchart of district capacity for DHH services. It shows the categories of staff members at every level for a district, including school and district-based professionals and leadership. If you are in a district that has every one of these positions filled with a qualified staff member, please let us know so we can put your district in our cloning machine. But it's more likely that a district is missing one or a few of these personnel. And for that reason, it is imperative that there is a contact within each district who can provide information and perhaps even training to each staff member, especially when the staff have little or no experience with students who are deaf and hard of hearing. The field of DHH is one of many facing a critical shortage. Caseloads, responsibilities, and constant battles to just do what's right are plaguing our profession. We cannot afford to lose one more teacher. This is an amazing field filled with incredible providers who are in it for the kids. We're in it for the outcome. Having a positive attitude about your job and workplace goes a long way in recruiting, whether you mean it to or not. The photo of the butterfly lighting on a marigold is symbolic of Jennifer Gonzalez's post, Find Your Marigold, the one essential rule for new teachers, where the author encourages experienced teachers to be marigolds, a plant known for protecting a wide variety of plants from pests and harmful weeds. She writes, if you plant a marigold beside most any garden vegetable, that vegetable will grow big and strong and healthy, protected and encouraged by its marigold. We need to be marigolds. Supporting people who come to this profession from another educational discipline or even another profession is vital for retention. Not everyone can come from a deaf education program, and it is imperative that we support all the teachers, just like we would all the kiddos. To be honest, very few districts will have all the parts and pieces in place for an optimized DHH program. So what do? The first line of defense in building a quality program is to recruit new staff members while keeping the ones you already have. Being familiar with the teacher prep programs, not just in your region, but around the state and nation, and welcoming interns and practicum students into your district is a way to encourage their application when they graduate. And while we don't encourage poaching from other educational disciplines, and definitely not from neighboring districts, if you are aware of someone who is already a teacher and is looking for a change, be that walking advertisement for the joy working in DHH, and that could be the catalyst that keeps them in the educational field. More and more contract agencies are providing the services of teachers, interpreters, SLPs, and many other hats, which may be able to provide quality services to students. In some cases, districts can even share duties and therefore the cost of certain services and professionals in order to meet the needs of students. One of the areas addressed in the Optimizing Outcomes book and key impact areas as identified by the National Deaf Center on Post-Secondary Outcomes is the need for highly qualified personnel. RMTC can post your vacancies on the homepage of our website and on social media. We're happy to help any district in exploring creative ways to build capacity and in the recruitment and retention of professionals working in the field of deaf, hard of hearing. Here are some examples of thinking outside the box. Fiddlers and NEFEC developed a model of service delivery that supports multiple districts. And then RMTC provided professional development and technical assistance to the teachers and other staff in those districts. In another situation, a district had an ESE teacher and RMTC provided the support for that teacher to study and pass the certification test while also coaching her on how to provide instruction for students who are deaf and hard of hearing. She learned ASL through the FSDB Outreach ASL classes offered online. UNF professors attended RMTC Fairview training along with a district's teacher of the deaf. UNF is teaching a reading class where the UNF students go into a cluster site and in a district to apply what they're reading in the class with their reading buddies in a real school. Collaboration with the university has provided additional skills for those pre-service teachers, which better prepares them for employment. In yet another situation, 2 districts didn't have a teacher of the deaf, so they hired DHH services through a virtual service, and the teacher was provided virtually to that district for 1 student. Years ago, another district used online services for students to take ASL classes from a deaf adult. Why is this important, you might be asking? Well, this year, that district has a teacher of the deaf who's a recent graduate of the University of North Florida. Her interest in deaf education started where? When she was taking ASL in her district. Does your district offer ASL? She was also exposed to Fairview because of that collaboration between UNF and RMTC, which prepared her for teaching. Some districts have started looking at the potential of using virtual and/or hybrid models for qualified service providers. This could be approached with caution because some students may not receive meaningful educational benefit from that delivery model, while other students may thrive. Being a new teacher of the deaf in some districts means that you're the only person in that role in the entire district. Sometimes even your mentor doesn't know what it is that you're supposed to be doing. RMTC has developed a new Teacher of the Deaf PLC for supporting new teachers in their roles as teachers for students who are deaf and hard of hearing, specifically for those who have been in the position for 2 years or less. Another resource developed by our project is the itinerant book study. This opportunity covers topics specific to the itinerant role, which is in many ways very different than any other teaching role. RMTC is also a collaborative partner with the Problem-Solving Response to Intervention Technology and Learning Connection projects Passport to Learning in the sensory strand. This professional development opportunity provides participants with access to a series of videos, a professional learning community for discussion, and opportunities for the development and sharing of artifacts from travel-themed professional development opportunities related to sensory topics. One final area to consider is to search through the Department of Education's website for professionals in your district who are certified in the certification area Hearing Impaired K-12 to see if anyone holds that certification who could possibly move over. The goal of the supports provided by RMTC is to help improve outcomes for students who are deaf and hard of hearing by preparing professionals to deliver the best services possible. Let us know how we can help. And sometimes you just have to find a new box altogether. There are many statewide agencies and programs that can help teachers to earn certification in Hearing Impaired K-12 or improve their skills necessary to perform the job. Flagler in St. Augustine has both bachelor's and master's programs. The University of North Florida has launched an online post-baccalaureate certificate program for people who have already earned bachelor's degrees or higher. The Florida Department of Education has financial support for those already working as paraprofessionals who would like to become teachers. Click on the hyperlinked text for information about the para-to-teacher tuition support programs. High school ASL classes have the potential to spark an interest in deafness-related professions, and even Florida Virtual School has an online ASL class. There are an increasing number of contracting agencies with whom districts can work to secure people in various positions, including teachers for students who are deaf and hard of hearing. What are some other ways to recruit and retain qualified providers? Feel free to put your answers in the chat box. But you know, as well as I do, that the only thing consistent in this field, okay, in education altogether, is change. So once we get that qualified staff in place, regardless of the path to certification, whether through a deaf ed prep program or by entering the field by passing the certification exam, every teacher has to engage in continuing education in order to ensure receiving the best education possible, utilizing the most up-to-date strategies, intervention, and curricula. All of that takes an individual's investment in learning and improving skills. There are many tools available online to help keep up with the ever-changing process of teaching and learning. One of our project's main goals is to provide quality professional development to educators working with students who are deaf and hard of hearing for one purpose: to improve the academic and post-secondary outcomes for learners who are deaf and hard of hearing in Florida. We have a webpage dedicated to all things professional development and would encourage you to check it out. Clearly, you already know about TA Live because you're here. But did you know that you can print a certificate of completion for each TA Live you view? Just head on over to that TA Live webpage, complete an evaluation, and the certificate will find its way into your email inbox. RMTC-DHH has also developed 3 online modules housed in the Bees portal. They are Deaf Ed Express, which is a great module for teachers who may be experiencing their first ever child who is deaf or hard of hearing. The second module is a guide to the Usher syndrome screening. And the last is language reading connection for students who are deaf and hard of hearing. Partners to whom we often refer districts for professional development are included in those last bullets. Deaf Tech, DCMP, the Lauren Clare National Deaf Education Center, and the Central Institute for the Deaf all have additional options for research and resources for teaching students who are deaf and hard of hearing. Each of these organizations offer free professional development options for professionals working with students who are deaf and hard of hearing. So let's recap. The field of education of students who are deaf and hard of hearing is small and so highly varied that it takes true and real experts to know how to navigate the big picture and the tiny details without losing sight of either. This is compounded by the fact that there are just not enough of us. So 1, we have to keep the ones we have. And 2, it's imperative that each person working in this field stays current on what's best for these unique students in order to deliver the highest quality instruction and provide equitable access to the environment. I leave you with this question. What are you going to do to encourage and empower qualified providers? Feel free to just think about it or put some ideas in the chat box. So now we're going to have our panel of experts come on and share how they have engaged in some out-of-the-box thinking to provide or arrange for qualified providers to support students in their districts. I'm excited to introduce all 3 of these ladies. Kailie Asam is the itinerant teacher for the deaf and hard of hearing for Monroe County School District. She has earned her Master of Science in Deaf Education from Washington University in St. Louis. Her previous experiences include serving as a parent educator at the Central Institute for the Deaf in St. Louis, Missouri, and as a Peace Corps response volunteer working at the High School for the Deaf in Eswatini, Africa. Lisa Curzio-Blake received her undergraduate degree from Flagler College and a Master of Arts in School Counseling and Guidance from Gallaudet University. She holds a certification in deaf education, elementary education, and is ESOL endorsed. She has worked She has worked with the DHH community and in education since 1988. She has been an educational interpreter, a DHH teacher, self-contained, itinerant, and full inclusion, and an adult education teacher. In addition, she's certified and practicing infant toddler development specialist for early steps and a licensed trainer in restorative practices. Since 2000, Lisa has been the family counselor for the DHH and vision impaired students in Pinellas County schools, serving the entire county. And April Vinson is the DHH and VI program contact in Columbia County. She also serves as a staffing specialist, alternate assessment coordinator, and 504 contact. April has been in the education system for 17 years, where she has served as an educator in both gen ed classrooms and special education classrooms. Additionally, she has experience as an instructional coach and school administrator. Welcome, Kailie Asam, Lisa Curzio-Blake, and April Vinson. Now that we've shared who we're featuring this month, let's dig in. We asked each panelist to respond to this question. In what ways have you been able to increase capacity in your school district to ensure your students have access to qualified providers? So April, when you're ready, go ahead and unmute and share with us a little bit about how you've thought outside of the box.
Well, thank you so much for having me. You called us experts to begin with, and I'm not sure that I'm necessarily an expert. I'm continuing to learn. It's definitely a process. So I have been the deaf, hard of hearing contact in Columbia County for 4 years. And when I started, I literally knew nothing about deaf, hard of hearing. I remember attending my first training and being very, very overwhelmed and not knowing the acronyms or any of the information. It was just flying at me. And thankfully, I was able to do some networking and get connected to some really great people, such as RMTC-DHH, Kara Wilmot and Candace and Sherry and everyone. They have been so helpful in coming to the district and helping us out. So specifically, our problems here in Columbia County, and we'll call them barriers, we didn't have a lot of capacity in regards to knowledge of deaf, hard of hearing, and what our students needed to be successful. We are a small rural district, and it's difficult to find qualified people in the area of deaf, hard of hearing, especially, a teacher of the deaf, hard of hearing, and then also certified interpreters. So, one of the things that we started doing to think outside of the box, again, I told you when I started, I knew very, very little about this program. And so I started attending all of the professional developments that I could get my hands on, all of the contact meetings, and again, just networking and getting in contact with people that could help me grow our program. One of the things that I really needed to focus on is, once I started touring the county and learning our students, when I first came on, we had a contract teacher of the deaf, hard of hearing, actually less than 1 day a week. And that's all we had for our entire caseload. And she only came 1 day a week, and she was actually an SLP. And we knew that is not what our kids needed. So through talking with people and learning more about the program itself, I approached our director, special education director, and advocated on behalf of the kids. And we really, I looked at the children and what they needed. And we were able to contract with NEFAC. So that's the Northeast Florida Educational Consortium. Because we're in a small district, a lot of these districts come together and we're umbrellaed under NEFAC. And sorry, I was reading the comment there. So we were umbrellaed under NEFAC, and through that, we were able to say there were 3 districts actually that had a need for this. And so we had this person start coming 3 to 4 days a week, and we shared her with 2 other counties, and that helped us with the cost. Going into next year, our county is going in a different direction, and we have been working very hard, as I've heard Kara and Candace say, growing our own person. So we've been working hard to grow our own people. One of the things is just getting out there, and when I'm out in the district talking about how great this program is, how wonderful these students are, and how big of a need there is in this area. So we do have a couple of teachers that we are looking at, seeing if they really are interested in taking this endeavor on full time, possibly an SLP slash teacher of the deaf, hard of hearing. But we're just, again, working on building our capacity in the county for that. But if you are part of an educational consortium, or if you can share with another district, that's a great way to get some of those certified, qualified educators in your district. Another thing, when we were doing that needs analysis of what do our kiddos need to be successful, one of the things we looked at, and it was, sometimes you have to take a little hard look, and it feels like a gut punch sometimes of going, oh, is this what we're doing, and what can we do to make it better? We had some interpreters in our county. We have 3, and when I first started, they weren't certified interpreters. They were definitely offering access to our students, but they were not certified, and we knew that we needed to look into a different direction there. So we actually contract now for 2 of our interpreters, and they are certified and they are amazing. And to just see how far these kiddos have come in 2 years. This is our 2nd year with our contract interpreters, and the growth that these children have made is it's just astonishing when you look to see where they were signing at the beginning and where they are now, their academics. It's very, very impressive. And so it just shows that, I would love to have interpreters they're from our district. And that's one thing I want to continue to work on is building that interest, and maybe trying to find even some high school students that are taking those ASL courses through Florida Virtual, getting them interested, and maybe having them come back into our district a few years down the road. So that's what we're working on. But we have definitely noticed a big impact by getting those certified interpreters into our county, even though, we do have to contract for them. And then lastly, what we have done to help these kids, again, it goes back to that needs analysis. What do our students on our caseload need? And one of the biggest things would be to place these kids carefully in the right teachers' classrooms. So I do meet with the principals, and we look to see what is the most appropriate placement for these children. What teachers are going to be flexible enough to handle this and to really roll with it, especially teachers that have never had any exposure to students that have interpreters in the classroom or that have a lot of needs. It needs to be the right fit. It needs to be someone that's willing to be flexible and take on that challenge. And so we've been very successful having those relationships with the principals. Every year, I've also had the Deafness 101 training. So at any school that we have our students in, especially our students with interpreters, I have the Deafness 101 training. And if you've not had that in your district, it's wonderful. I've sat through it several times now, and I learned something new every single time. And the teachers, the feedback is always, that was one of the best professional developments that I have sat through. It was very informative. And so, those are just some things that we've done in our district to help build capacity, to, increase the student outcomes, increasing our quality of educators that we have working with these kiddos.
That is great information, April. I went ahead and made that we had your solutions lab. I love that you have all of that on there so that people who can take that and really look at it and see, take it outside of the video from this and be able to look at the slide to see what kind of things that they've done to encourage that those qualified professionals when they're within the district. Thank you so much for that. And I really like the way you thought outside of the box in terms of contracting interpreters and getting those trainings in. It's really impacting your kids that way. So on behalf of everybody, thank you so much, April. Nice job. I am going to call Lisa Curzio-Blake up now, and she's going to share with us a little bit about what's happening in her district.
I was having a little crisis with my computer. I apologize. Well, as most of you guys know, thank you for having me, first of all. Most of you know a problem pervasive in our field is that research shows that hearing loss impacts every developmental stage of a child, their communication, their language, their education, their experience, their social, psychological, all the way up to their vocational, economic as they get older. So I've been lucky, kind of different from April. I've always lived in big cities and big areas where there's a large deaf population. So I mentored in Broward as a deaf and hard of hearing counselor. And I really wanted to work with kids. I saw that there was a need throughout my career because I started out as a teacher. And I worked with my wonderful mentors in Broward County. I looked all over the state. And then I also was going outside, out of state to look for a counseling position. And I turned out, we went for it and decided to try St. Pete, and I interviewed with the coordinator then at the time, Marianne Ziegler, and she really saw the need. And I think that's the important thing. The people above us, the supervisors, they have to really understand that a deaf child just isn't the educational part of them. They're the whole child. They're the social, emotional, educational. It takes all these pieces to become a whole child. So I was lucky enough to start the DHH counseling program, and it's more of one that's preventative. So in the elementary school, of course, it's more teaching. I think I have another slide as well. If you have my next slide. So I work kind of like a lot of us. I work the whole county, which sounds overwhelming, but it really has been manageable over the years. So we all know how important early intervention is. So our DHH teachers that work with the 0 to 3, they really have a good feel for their parents that have newly identified deaf babies. So a lot of times I am invited into families' homes, and I can talk with the parents because they're going through all these emotions, the stages of grief, and trying to figure out with all the specialists and acronyms, it's totally overwhelming. So I become involved early on, and I also am an early interventionist. So I meet a lot of the parents through that as well. The K through 8 is more about learning, especially in the elementary school, affective communication, just learning basic feelings. We know how important it is to be able to express our feelings, and that is the beginning of self-regulation for our emotions and actions. By the time we get to middle school, it's a little less teaching, and it's more problem solving and dealing with hormones, basically, and all the changes that middle schoolers go through. I see a lot of students at that point in time really don't want to wear their hearing aids. They don't want to be set apart like any middle schooler, basically. So we talk through that. And then in high school, it really is, it's not so much part of the program in elementary and middle school. We have it as a preventive model set up, but as they go into high school, it's more on an as needed basis. And it's I have a social emotional checklist that the teachers complete to see if counseling is something that would work for them. And that's more their specific needs. And a lot of it is based on their hearing loss.
Those are excellent points, Lisa. I would just like to reiterate and emphasize something you said at the beginning about how access to language and it impacts every aspect of education. It's not just about their grades. It's about every bit of that access to the learning environment. And I think that bears repeating because that is something that is so important for all of our kids. So thank you so much for making that point.
I think it's really hard to convince administrators that is, you can't teach a child who's hurting and going through stuff, it's not how we work as human beings. I worked with a student this morning who said, I just don't like school right now. I have too much going on. And, we talk about that. It's okay they still have to be concerned with their grades, but they need an outlet. And the fact that, we understand deafness and the struggles they go through. Most of us just want to be heard. And that's it's very basic.
Well, you have to Maslow before you can bloom, right? You have to get those basic life needs taken care of before you can worry about teaching or learning or balancing your checkbook or we as adults have those experiences too.
Right.
So I love those points. I think that they're fantastic, Lisa. Thank you.
It's a very condensed version.
Yes. Well, we would love to have some more of that sometime, I'm sure. So thank you so much for sharing today.
You're welcome. I appreciate you guys including me.
We would love to have you again.
Oh, my pleasure. I would love to.
I am going to now bring in Kailie Asam from Monroe County to share a little bit about some unique things she did down south.
Good afternoon. Thanks for sticking with me. I'm so happy to be here today and to be talking about such an important topic in deaf education. So as Sherry mentioned, I work in Monroe County School District, which is the district that covers the Florida Keys. When I started in this district, I knew right away that the geographic challenges were going to create quite a barrier to services. And that I'd need to be creative in ensuring that students had that access to quality providers for all of their communication needs. So one of the big problems that I came across was with my students who have minimal to no language. I have multiple students who are DHH in this situation, and these students are in schools from Key Largo all the way to Key West, which means that they're 104 miles or about a 2.5-hour drive apart from one another. And so while my initial thought was, how can I get these students together and learning in a group, I quickly realized that this would be tough with the distance between the students. It was clear to me that the schools were at a bit of a loss for how to support these students. Many of them were placed in ESE classes that had really high behavior needs, but really the students were in those classes due to their low academics, and these students didn't have behavior concerns. They just needed access to language. All of the students had some functional listening, so environmental sounds, emergency sounds, single word familiar objects, people or directives, and they're absolute rock stars at following a classroom routine. So I'm sure you can imagine this allows them to fly under the radar in a classroom full of students who have a lot of behavior needs. And so these students had minimal to no progress in their language development. Without an interpreter or any formal ASL instruction, they all relied on home signs, visual cues, some signed exact English and finger spelling. And all of their parents preferred a listening and spoken language approach and are native Spanish speakers. So all of the students had either bilateral hearing aids or bilateral cochlear implants, and they're exposed to spoken Spanish at home, spoken English at school, and then this kind of mixed bag as far as the manual communication goes. And then finally, the district has just the one itinerant teacher of the deaf, and I have a varying caseload that hovers around 25 students across this 180-mile stretch with a one-lane road. So I tell you this just to emphasize the discrepancy between the services that are clearly needed, especially for these students with minimal to no language, and then what can be physically done by one person with such a geographically challenging environment. So what did we do? Our solution was to contract a deaf ASL instructor to serve as a language model and a role model for our students. She was contracted to work virtually with the students and provide both vocabulary development and language instruction individually. So while we wanted her to work with the students individually to help them develop their language base, we also wanted to create a community where one failed to exist. So our ASL instructor facilitates a weekly community group with students, teachers, and parents all being invited to participate. Eventually, we also added some hearing peers that enjoyed signing with the students throughout their day. And I really loved this addition so that the students had those communication partners outside of their online instructional hours. We were incredibly lucky to find an ASL instructor who's Latina. She's fluent in ASL, Spanish, and English, and we were really able to bridge this cross-cultural communication gap that existed on multiple levels. So she's able to communicate directly with all of the Spanish-speaking parents, and this has really resulted in parents who have become even stronger advocates for their children. Some of the parents have begun taking the ASL classes through Florida School for the Deaf and Blind. One parent loved the community group so much that now she joins all of my sessions with her children from home, which is such a cool opportunity for parent involvement and coaching and just kind of seeing their home environment and some of that stuff that rolled over from COVID, showing pets and things that happen in the home and getting to talk about those things. And she's also talking about facilitating a group this summer to keep the students in contact with each other. And then the students have transitioned many of their home signs into formal signs, and their ASL vocabulary has increased. They're engaging in conversational turn-taking and even storytelling that they weren't doing initially, answering comprehension and WH questions, and just they've overall become much more natural communicators with the influence of a deaf mentor. So while we know there's still a lot of work to be done to close the language gap for these students, it's been really incredible to see the reach that bringing a qualified provider in has had on them, and not just on the students, but the teachers and the parents and the hearing peers. So our DHH community not only exists now, but it's active and it's growing. So it's been a really good experience.
Kailie, you make that sound so easy. Like, we just did this and we put all these, but there are lots of moving pieces and parts to that. I know. No, I mean, just getting them all in one place, I'm sure was a barrier that you guys worked around, given that 104-mile geography gap. So it's a perseverance thing too. I mean, there's just that every time a barrier comes up, just finding a workaround. And I think that that's really key to finding a successful program like this. And I'm just going to say, hearing that, you know, you see huge growth in the students' language, that makes every minute of that worth it, you know, to know that those kids are able to see that kind of growth. It's so exciting, and it's validating to all of us that are like, you know, we feel that struggle of working through some of these barriers in all kinds of different big districts, little districts. I mean, everybody has something that they're trying to overcome. And so to hear that, like, there is light at the end of the tunnel, that, you know, that for our students to progress, that's beautiful. And I love it. I love that you thought outside of the box to find someone who wasn't already a naturally occurring phenomenon in your district and found that.
Anywhere, probably.
Right. No, I think that's a great model.
Thanks.
So if you guys would like, April and Lisa, if you guys want to turn your cameras back on, we do have a couple of questions in the Q&A, and I'll pose those to the panel. And if you guys are not sure, I've got some RMTC friends in the background too. So the first question was already answered, and it was asking about the Department of Education changing the term for the certification that is currently hearing impaired K-12. Well, I am excited to say huzzah that the statute has passed and the rule has changed the name to deaf, hard of hearing K-12. But I will say that even though that the statute is changed, if you were certified prior to the change, like a lot of us in the room, that your certification will probably only change if you retest or get the new certification. We're not sure about that. Catherine Montesino also asks, or she writes, I've met several DHH teachers who don't use ASL. How does that work when many DHH students do use ASL? Is knowing ASL as a DHH teacher a different level of qualification? And I will say that the hearing impaired K-12 or the DHH K-12, hopefully it will change, test does have ASL components in it. But like interpreters, there are no state level requirements for ASL proficiency. So how do you guys meet that need between where the students are performing and where the teachers are performing? April, I see you turned your mic on first, so I'll ask you to answer first.
So in our county, our TODHH she does not know a lot of ASL, and clearly the ones that we're growing are not going to know it. So our interpreter just goes with them. So if they're getting services from that person, the interpreter is there, just like when they go to language therapy or any of those other types of things, occupational therapy, that interpreter follows them and just interprets for them. It's not necessarily, optimal, but it works. And the kids are definitely getting the services that they need to help them progress.
Thank you so much. That's a good point. Kailie or Lisa?
Yeah, I got certified outside of Florida and didn't have ASL on my certification test. And coming to Florida, a big piece of working in the school districts here was recognizing my limitations when it comes to ASL, and then thinking outside of the box to find the qualified provider, because I'm not deaf and I can't be a deaf mentor for these students, but I know that they need that. So how can I make that happen for them? And so I think we would love to get to a place where we have interpreters available in the Keys, but that can be really hard down here. So we're going to keep thinking creatively about that. But that's something that I do think is a really good question about the certification being different, whether you have ASL or not.
It is.
Here we're a little bigger county, so in our self-contained classes, all of the teachers are pretty fluent in ASL. And if there are kids that are mainstream, they go out with the interpreter, and same thing with like OT, PT. For my own experience, I went to Flagler and we had to have, I think it was 5 or 6 classes with, manual communication, sign language, ASL, receptive. And then I also interned at FSDB. So I'm grateful for the background I do have, but I know in a lot of smaller counties, it's hard to find.
And that is very true. There are districts that have a plethora of professionals working that are fluent in ASL. And then there are other districts who are just trying to find staff members. I mean, like there are districts that even getting a contract agency to come out into the district is difficult because they're so far removed from wherever the agency is located. So, that's why we made the point in the original slide deck to say that we have to continue building our skills. And I think that includes, continuously learning and practicing ASL, but also knowing that our kids are coming at us at all different levels too. That's not to say that having those qualified, beautiful, fluent ASL models isn't important, because they are vital. But I also love that we're validating the people that are continuing to move forward, continuing to increase those skills for the betterment of their students. We have a couple of other questions in the Q&A. An anonymous attendee wrote, as a teacher for the deaf and hard of hearing, I have received my certification to teach and have consistently taken new trainings every year and have knowledge and curriculum in Fairview, Sky High, Foundations for Literacy, Finger Spelling Our Way to Reading, and the Expanded Expressions tool. My struggle comes in knowing my sign skill is not the best. I'm trying to improve by what free courses I can find. With my younger students, it isn't much of an issue, but when my students get older, I find it hard to not rely on an interpreter for assistance in communicating. I know that interpreters have to meet certain qualifications in order to be hired by the school districts and to work with our students, but should I also be meeting those same expectations? Why is that not a qualification for teachers of the deaf? And that's a tough question. Would any of you like to address that?
I would say, you know, I'm not sure where they're from, but their community, how I learned a lot. I think my skills improved over the years, just working with the older kids and just being open and knowing that we can make mistakes. Like if I don't know a sign, I'm totally fine with saying, you know, what do you sign for that? And like any language, language is changing, so signing is changing. And, you know, with Instagram and Snapchat, there's so many new signs that it's hard to keep track of, but, you know, and it's important though. And deaf adult, you know, if you can, there's not a lot of deaf socials anymore, especially since COVID, but, you know, whenever you can interact with the deaf community is a good, I would suggest.
I agree that just getting in there, and like you have to put ourselves in those stretching and uncomfortable situations where our language, where the language being used is a little bit higher than where we are now. And that takes some courage, first of all, but it also takes, you know, some patience on ourselves to be able to do that.
Super uncomfortable.
Definitely. But hey, that we grow in the struggle, right? That's where the work happens. So, ladies, thank you so much for being here. This has truly been very enjoyable, and gosh, we've collected some great quotes from all three of you. And so your sphere of influence is going to be expanded from today's experiences, and we really are grateful. We do want to thank you again, Kailie Asam, Lisa Curzio-Blake, and April Vinson. We appreciate your time and expertise on this topic. We know that this is a different kind of school year. And so we just want everyone here to know that RMTC is here to support you. Thank you for being here and being with us today. We would also like to take this time to thank our ASL interpreter, Catherine Montoya from AI Media, for providing the captions today.
Thank you for watching this TA Live webinar. RMTC-DHH is a Florida Department of Education, Bureau of Exceptional Education and Student Services discretionary project, and all of the services we provide are at no cost to Florida stakeholders. To continue our work, we must collect survey data to justify why our services are needed. If you could please complete our survey, we would greatly appreciate it. You can keep in touch with RMTC-DHH by following us on social media, and we have a Vimeo and YouTube channel with a plethora of videos of our presentations, our TA Live webinars, and some additional videos demonstrating working with students who are DHH. If you have any questions, please reach out to us at info@rmtcdhh.org.